Hello, welcome to Full Record Jacket. I'm Phil. He's Ben.
I'm Ben.
We are the YouTube show where we talk about nothing except music, because why would you want to talk about anything except music? And we go back as far as recorded music itself goes on occasion, and we tend to focus on alternative rock and classic rock and then everything else in between. And we just
Even
see
jazz.
where it goes. Even jazz, and that will come up
That will.
on this particular episode, because today we present you our favourite live albums. Now, a quick introduction to this. We're not saying necessarily these are the greatest live albums of all time, although some of them may well be.
Yeah.
But these are our personal favourites that we've chosen for whatever reason. I had no idea which 10 Ben was going to choose. Ben had no idea which 5 I was going to choose. And in this edition, we're going to do the first 5 of each. And Ben, I welcome you to kick off with your first.
Well, my first one, Phil, and I've put these in completely the wrong order because I am an idiot. My first one, now, I bet yours are all on CD, aren't they?
They are, actually, yeah.
Yeah, mine are going to take up a little bit more room. But my first one is Kieran Lavery, Live at the Mac. Recorded in 2016. It's there's just something about his voice. I just really like him, and it's quite haunting. And I'm going to use the word haunting a lot during this video, but it's very good. Yeah, it's a lot of the stuff from his 2 releases, Not Nearly Dark and Kosher. Not from his most well-known album, Let Bad In, which is a great album. Got a string quartet. Who doesn't love strings?
He's a bit of a blank spot in my music knowledge because I don't really know him. But I gather he's a singer-songwriter.
He is Irish. He's Irish, and got a couple of cover versions on there. Love Will Tear Us Apart by Joy Division, and Streets of Philadelphia by Bruce Springsteen, and finishes off with Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas. So even if you're listening in April, you can have some festivity. What more do you want from a live album? But that's my number 10. That's my number 10. And this is a fairly new one to me. So that's probably why it's in there, because I've listened to it more recently than any other one, really. So that's why that's in there. But very good album. Very solid. Very sort of, one of these guys who sounds like he does on his album, but a bit more real, as it were.
So that's Kieran Lavery with your haunting. That's your sort of haunting. Is it quite mellow? I gather. It's
very mellow. Yeah. It's got a very raspy. Well, in parts raspy, but it's just a good album.
Okay. Well, my first one is not mellow.
Put it on and be. Oh, is it not? Are you going to blow me out the park now?
This would blow you out the park if you put it on and crank the volume up to 10. This is The Who. Live at Leeds. Ooh. Now, I have to say, I'm not the biggest fan of The Who. I'm not to say I don't like them, because I do appreciate them quite a bit. But I tend to be sort of more of a Stones fan than a Who fan.
Yeah,
and they're not
in that boat as well.
They're not really a go-to band for me in the way that, say, the Stones are. When I very frequently will listen to the Stones, The Who, every now and again, I'll have a blast of The Who. And this is probably my favourite thing by The Who, which is totally different to the Stones, because generally if I listen to the Stones, it will be the studio stuff. But this is my favourite thing by The Who. Quick resume of it. They actually wanted to make a live album, so they did this performance at Leeds University in February 1970. And it was recorded. The show the next day in Hull was also recorded. That's since come out as The Who Live at Hull. Some fans think that's better than Live at Leeds, but Live at Leeds is regarded as a classic live album. Now, the original LP only had
7 tracks.
It did have about 6 tracks on it. There's a couple of very long ones on there. My Generation's a very long medley, etc. But this is the 1995 expanded edition, which beefed it up to over an hour. But the performance itself was sort of 2 halves. They played a whole load of their rock stuff, some of their hits, and some covers like Young Man Blues and Shaking All Over. And then the second half of the show, they basically played the Tommy album. So that's since been released. You can buy the whole thing now, but I've gone for the mid version, the expanded edition, but not the whole thing. But have it any way you like. But it is an astonishing live album, amazing drumming by Keith Moon, all the band on great form, and it's got a real sort of loud, clattery sound to it. And I guess this is probably the album, perhaps more than any, that set the tone for heavy rock having the live album as being a standard format for heavy rock in the 70s.
I've never listened to it.
No, you'll have to have a listen. It's interesting. 1970, Led Zeppelin could have done this at the time, but they didn't do a live album, or didn't do one for a while anyway. And so Live at Leeds by The Who became the kind of the template for 70s heavy rock. And I think I know heavy rock fans will be saying to me, well, why haven't you got AC/DC, If You Want Blood, Deep Purple, Made in Japan, Thin Lizzy, Live and Dangerous. There's all these ones. Cheap
Glenn
Trick.
Campbell.
Yeah, Cheap Trick at Budokan. Glenn Rocked It somewhere, probably.
Yeah, somewhere, probably.
But there we go. That's my rocking start, The Who, Live at Leeds.
You've blown my mellow train out of the water.
I have.
Not that a train would be on the water, but you've blown my mellow battleship. Anyway, my next one. Let me just delve into my sack of joy, the 12-inch joy here. My second one, number 9, I've counted this as, Phil. Bob Dylan, Before the Flood.
Bob Dylan and the band.
Recorded with the band. And the band, I think it was recorded in 1974. I think that it's got some of my favourite Bob Dylan tracks on it, like a Rolling Stone, All Along the Watchtower, stuff like that. It's 4 sides. That's a meaty album.
In rocking versions.
And, it is, and it's just got Bob Dylan with a lot of energy, which is something I don't always associate Bob Dylan with. And maybe it's because he was with the band, but he just seems, I don't know, there's just something about this album. When I listen to it, it's like I listen to it and then I need to listen to it again because I feel like there's something I've missed every time. So,
it is a good one.
Number 9. It is a very good one. I know he's recorded, I've got a couple of Bob Dylan live ones, etc. But I think this one in his canon, his arsenal of material, and it's got the band with it as well. So you've got 2 great things coming together, like Me and You. But
it could be said.
So
yeah, no, it's high on energy. It's a high energy performance from Dylan. Apparently, that's what people told him after the concerts, and he got a bit fed up with being told he was energetic. So then he made a complete about turn and did the Blood on the Tracks album after that. It's typical Dylan. Yeah. But, okay, so that was your
9. That's my number 9.
Okay, well, my number 9 is the first of my sort of event albums, because I do quite like live albums when they commemorate big events. And we did say we were going to be jazzing it a little bit in this particular edition. Duke Ellington, live at Newport, 1956.
You were born around then.
And I was, yeah. And bit of a story behind this one. This was Duke Ellington's appearance at, say, Newport, Rhode Island, the famous jazz festival in 1956. It was sort of, I think, a bit of a comeback for him at the time, or it gained him a bit of a new audience as well. And the thing about this album, when it first came out, it was a little bit of a con, because some of the tracks were re-recorded in the studio because he wasn't happy with the recording quality. But what you can get now is the original tapes. And essentially, I don't want to get too geeky about this, but Columbia Records were recording it. Some of the band members played into the wrong microphones, I believe, and so the tapes weren't very good, which is why it was done again in the studio. But it was also recorded for Voice of America for a radio broadcast, and those tapes turned up in the 90s, and they were able to do some engineering genius and bring it back to life. So the thing about this, it has a 15-minute track on it, Diminuendo and Crescendo in Blue, where Paul Gonsalves, the sax player, plays this long sax solo, and everybody was dancing. And then when they stopped playing, the crowd wanted more, and they nearly had a riot. Apparently, they nearly had a riot at the Newport Jazz Festival, but Duke and the band calmed the crowd and played on. But it's a really interesting curio. It takes you back to a sunny afternoon in America in 1956. So that's Duke Ellington.
Go together, really. Riots and jazz.
There you go. Duke at Newport, 1956. That's my number 9.
That is your number 9. It's on to my number 8. See, because I almost went for Muddy Waters live at Newport in 1960. But he didn't.
That would have been a good one to follow this one.
And I kind of wish I'd gone for that. But I've gone for albums that I sort of listen to more than others, rather than they're amazing. But they are amazing because some of them I was at. This one I wasn't. But it is at number 8. We spoke about him a lot, to be fair. We might be sort of stalkerish when it comes to Ryan Adams. This is Ryan Adams live at Carnegie Hall, recorded in 2014. So it was released in 2015. This is the 10-song version. The original recording was 42 songs, almost 4 hours he played for. But he's got real good interaction with the crowd, and it's got, 42 songs. It's got almost every song he's ever done on it. But this is obviously the 10-song version. This gives you a sort of a highlight into it. Whether you want to put yourself through almost 4 hours of Ryan Adams is completely up to you. But Carnegie Hall, one of those sort of iconic places to play, I suppose. And I just like the fact that when he's talking to the crowd through it, he's very, very sort of almost like he shouldn't be there. He's almost, it's just the way he talks to the crowd. It's very sort of not in the way that Liam Gallagher talks to a crowd. He's very sort of converse and normal, I suppose, the way he is. But a really, really good album. Even in this snapshot of 25% of what was recorded on the night, it's he never fails to deliver live or recorded. So hopefully Philly won't take a restraining order out. So this is my number 8. Very good album.
That's Ryan Adams at Carnegie Hall.
Carnegie Hall, yeah.
That's the title of it.
Yeah, live at Carnegie Hall. I think, 10 songs from Carnegie Hall, this one's called. But I think you can get the full 42-song version somewhere, no doubt. The vinyl must be that
probably
thick.
There's a lot of Ryan Adams out there. He's made a lot of records.
He has, yes. That's my number 8, and I'm happy with my number 8. So, yeah, that's what we're going for.
Okay, well, my next one, it's certainly a prestigious venue. San Quentin Prison. Can you guess who was performing there?
I can guess because this is going to be one of mine as well.
Well, we may have overlapped or nearly overlapped. I've gone for Johnny Cash at San Quentin. It was a toss-up between this and Folsom Prison. And what swung it for me, is probably a bit of nostalgia because my dad had this and I'm familiar with it from childhood. The original album was only about 30 minutes long. And some of the things that Johnny says got bleeped out. Including, most famously, of course, in A Boy Named Sue. On the reissue, the bleeps have been removed. You can actually hear what he said. And it's actually a bit disappointing because it's not as extreme
Oh,
as you thought from the bleep. In fact, in some ways, it almost makes you want the bleeps back, so you can imagine that it was much more salty than it actually is. But it's
yeah,
I think for me, this one has maybe slightly more of Johnny having a rapport with the prisoners, because this was the second Prison album, and it was also
yeah.
where the guitarist Luther Perkins had died, and he was replaced by another guy whose name escapes me. But it does give the band a slightly different sound.
Was that the album that was it Granada TV filmed it? Was that the
This
one with
is
the
it,
famous
yes.
middle finger gesture?
Yeah, this is the one that was filmed, and it was for Granada TV in the UK.
I
Filmed it,
don't know
but
how I know that.
so there we go. So that's my number 8, Johnny Cash at San Quentin.
Well, I'm going to have to change one of mine now, because that was going to be my number 6. Simple fact: my dad was a country and western fan, and we had this quadruple tape album we used to listen to on the way to Cornwall to my granddad's. And Boy Named Sue was it was a little bit sort of dangerous because it had a naughty word on it. So yeah, that's the first thing that got me into Johnny Cash, and that's why that was going to be at my number 6. But it was a very toss up between that and something else, which I'll replace it with. We'll come on to that in a bit. But we're on to my number 7, aren't we? Now, I don't need as big a camera for this one, Phil, because I've actually got this on CD, because it's about £400 on vinyl. And my number 7, I was actually at the gig on the Friday night, Wembley 2000, and it is Oasis, Familiar to Millions. To be fair, most of the recording, I think, on this, there's some overdubs which were done in the Yokohama concert a bit later in Japan, because I can't remember if this was taken from the Friday or the Saturday. Now, I was at the Friday, which was brilliant, and they were completely on form. The Saturday, which I think was broadcast on Sky as well, Liam was on full-on meltdown and did everything he could, because I think he knew he was being recorded, to basically sabotage what is mainly in this, singing words wrong, not singing when he was supposed to, etc., etc. It was the famous gig when he was going on about tea bags and trying to find a house, etc. But that aside, because I was there, and I had a little staring competition with Liam Gallagher in the crowd, because I ended up in the VIP section at the front. I think Zoe Ball, Sarah Cox, people like that were there. And this album gets me on to one of my later ones, which we'll probably do in another episode. But yeah, this is just because I was there, and the energy it provided, 70-odd thousand people. And the fact that it's just Liam being Liam in a lot of it. So, and obviously I'm a massive Oasis fan, so I had to have one of them in there anyway. And this is the only one they've released officially. So that, my Chuckies, is my number 7. Familiar to Millions, 23 years old this year. That is. So, yeah, that's my number 7. Too expensive on vinyl. Double CD we'll have to do. So
well, my number 7 is someone who probably didn't really enjoy being recorded for TV either, knowing what he's like, because he can be a bit contrary at times. It's Neil Young,
Ooh.
MTV Unplugged. Now, this was actually quite popular at the time, I think. I knew one or two people who had this album. It wasn't quite as big as one or two of the other MTV Unplugged albums,
yeah.
but I think it won a few fans for Neil Young. It's obviously the mellow side of him, and he brings out a whole load of songs from across his career. He goes back as far as Buffalo Springfield and Crosby, Stills and Nash and Young, and then obviously his solo albums as well. And he also does some of his electric songs in different versions. I think the most talked about one of those is Like a Hurricane, which is rearranged for pump organ, which is interesting. Some Neil Young fans poo-poo this a little bit because they think he wasn't really on the most engaging form. They think he sounds maybe a bit tired on this, but I think it kind of helps to give it a charm of its own. It's a very mellow take on Neil Young's music, and it's just quite a listenable one. So I've got it in there. And it's what I did listen to a lot at the time. I still do every now and again. So Neil Young, Unplugged.
I quite like it when you say things like poo poo and sax. It's weirdly. My number 6. Obviously, we've already discussed my number 6 because my number 6 is going to be Johnny Cash live at St Quentin for the simple reason of growing up with Johnny Cash, etc. But it was a very, very... Now, I haven't got it to hand because you've ruined it. But it was a toss-up between that album and the Folsom Prison album. So, only thing is, Folsom Prison hasn't got Boy Named Sue on it, which is what swung it for me in the end. So, just imagine me holding it up. It's Cash being Cash live, not really, interacting with those prisoners. You can hear them in the background all rowdy.
There's some great tracks on there, though. There's the Cocaine Blues is on there, and is it Orange Blossom Special, the sort of very rapid fire version of Orange Blossom Special. And of course, that's the one that starts off with "Hello, I'm Johnny Cash" and goes into Folsom Prison Blues.
Yeah. So I just love that. Yeah, both of them. They could have, like I say, if he'd released them as a live double album, that would have been. But yeah, that's my number 6. I don't have it to hand because you've gone and ruined that for me, Phil. So.
Sorry about that. Well, my final one for this episode is, now you could argue that this is not historically a live album because it didn't come out as a live album at the time, but it is certainly historic, and it is Bob Dylan live in 1966. And this is the fabled, it tells you at the bottom here, the inverted commas Royal Albert Hall concert. And the reason for that is this is a show from his 1966 tour where it was bootlegged at the time, and it was believed at the time by fans to be a bootleg of the performance that took place at the Royal Albert Hall at that time. He did a show at the Royal Albert Hall. The Beatles went to that show. I think the Rolling Stones may have gone as well. And it was presumed that that was the one that had been bootlegged. But this actually took place at Manchester Free Trade Hall in May of 1966. And this is effectively Bob Dylan and the band as well, although this time the band were called the Hawks. And
yes, they were,
it's the same lineup, apart from doesn't have Levon Helm on drums. So you've got Rick Danko and... on bass, and on the organ Garth Hudson, and you've got Richard Manuel playing. I think Richard Manuel is on it. Might be wrong about that, but Robbie Robertson is certain. Yeah, maybe. I think so. I may be wrong about that, but Robbie Robertson is most definitely on it because Robbie Robertson plays some excellent guitar solos on this. It's split into 2 halves. The first half is acoustic. The first half is Bob being very dreamy, probably been smoking something, doing the long acoustic songs, but it's the second half, the second disc, that is really astonishing. That's the sort of, obviously it was controversial at the time. A lot of his fans didn't like the fact he was doing loud, noisy electric rock music, but if you like loud, noisy electric rock music, this is a great historical artifact. It's very, raw, clattery, primitive, everything I like, really. So there we go. That's my number 6.
I think that's a good opening. I think we've got 5 strong albums to lead us into the next 5.
We have. So if you've enjoyed this so far, keep watching and find episode 2, because we will do another 5 live albums each. But in the meantime, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like